Hi, good morning. Can someone give me a quick chat and let me know that you can hear me okay? Oh, great. I was in the chat. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Heather. Okay, if you have any audio issues, just please pop a question in the question box or put something in the chat right away so that I know there's an issue. Now, you should also be able to see my screen. I have a slideshow up, the YHDP in HMIS. So if you're not seeing that, let me know. You should be just making sure that we're also recording. I will leave you all on mute, but then we just demonstrated that I can unmute you anytime. So feel free to pop a hand up if you have any questions. The webinar is going to be recorded today. Okay, I think we're all good on housekeeping. Y'all can raise hands, do questions, or chat. And okay, great. Thanks, Sam. And so we should be able to get started. Now, with that said about the recording, please interrupt me at any time to chat, question, or raise a hand. Okay, so YHDP and HMIS, Youth Homelessness Demonstration Project in the Homeless Management Information System. We are publicly funded, which means we have lots of juicy acronyms that we use. So our agenda today is to do a little background in HMIS, to do some demo, to offer you some resources, and then to answer any questions that you may have. So for background on what HMIS is, it's a locally administered database that is used to record and analyze client service and housing data for individuals and families who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. But the definition of HMIS comes from the HMIS data standards, which is a two-part document that includes a data dictionary and a data manual, which is pretty much the Bible for HMIS administrators. It's publicly available, and you're welcome to dive into it if that's the kind of thing that interests you, but it's really our job to stay on top of that and make sure everything in the system is compliant for you. Okay. So high quality HMIS data allows us to capture the narrative of youth and young adults experiencing homelessness from housing crisis through referral, placement, services, and exit. So that's really what we're trying to do here, is to be able to tell HUD and whoever else how the great work you're doing is impacting youth on the ground. And this data allows for continuous quality improvement at the local, regional, continuum of care, and national level. So the continuum of care is the HUD designation. They're completely random. They have to do with how grants were applied for 1,000 years ago. We're part of the 80-county Ohio balance of state, which means we're all of Ohio that isn't Columbus, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Dayton, Akron, Youngstown, Canton, Toledo. I think I got them all. Okay, so at the local level for the YHDP, 5 YHDP counties, the kinds of things we can look at with HMIS data is, how long did it take for a youth to get referred to emergency housing or to permanent housing? How long did they stay homeless, or how long did they stay in a housing program? What types of services were provided to them? What types of goals were completed? We're using the goals feature for YHDP. So for those of you that are familiar with HMIS in the Ohio balance of state, that's not something that is a part of our regular workflow, but it's something that we're using for YHDP to capture those goals around like education and employment that aren't as easily tracked with the data elements that exist. Positive changes in assessment data. So again, we're looking at some of those general health status questions. We'll go over all this data later, but we're looking at changes over time in some of the assessment questions. And then of course our exit destinations. Did youth have positive exits? All right. And then at the regional level, of course, our 5 counties are part of the 7-county region, homeless planning region 17 for the state of Ohio. So the balance of state COC is divided by the state into these 17 homeless planning regions. Our YHDP area is part of region 17, so all of our counties plus Hocking and Perry counties. And at the regional level, what we're really looking at is coordinated entry. So when youth are accessing the system, how effectively are you moving them through the process of access, assessment, prioritization, and referral that are the components of coordinated entry. Then at the COC level, the Ohio Balance of State has a performance management plan that evaluates the functioning of the Balance of State homeless services system as a whole. So that's a big job, right? Because what's happening up in Defiance is very different than what might be happening in Athens. But we do have some broad targets that are based on what HUD is looking at that we evaluate for the entire continuum. And of course, the YHDP data at the project level is contributing to that overall evaluation of performance for the continuum. And of course, that goes to our COC application, which keeps funds coming into our region. And the past few years, we've been losing funds, not because we're low performing, but just because the funding has gotten tighter. So it's more competitive. And so data is pretty much exclusively what's looked at in terms of the federal grant process. So it's just really important to have high quality data to keep those funds flowing in to serve the people in our communities that are in need. And then at the national level, we've actually been participating in the Away Home America Community Dashboard effort. So this is a voluntary effort of various communities talking about what youth homelessness is looking like in their communities. So, and then this data is and we also participate in the point in time count. So point in time data is used at the national level for funding designations. And then this dashboard is being used to inform a lot of youth homelessness and housing planning efforts around the country. So being able to have data in HMIS that is then put into this dashboard compared with what's happening in other communities is helpful to the overall national effort to end youth homelessness. Yes, this is a publicly available dashboard. So I can follow up with you after the webinar and send the link. Or if you just Google Away Home America, you should be able to access it from their homepage. But I'm pretty sure it is actually publicly available. Okay, great. Thanks, Sam. Let me know if you can't find it. I'm spoiled because I'm a participant, so they link it for me, and I'm not used to navigating it from scratch. Okay, so before we go into the demo, I'll be switching back and forth between the presentation and doing live demonstration and service point, but I want to talk about what the path is for a client through coordinated entry. And this is pretty much the same for youth, although we have some streamlined processes since we have dedicated youth programming, similar to how we have streamlined processes for homeless veterans. But basically, if an unsheltered person is encountered, they're either immediately referred to shelter, or if they're unable or unwilling to go to shelter, they're entered into our unsheltered provider, which is a way of tracking unsheltered homelessness in the continuum. Now, for youth, they'll probably go right into the supportive services only project and be referred from there. But I still want to talk about this process because especially our 18 to 24, we may have people coming in who already have existing HMIS records or have moved through part of this process. And then after the client is assessed with the appropriate VI-SPDAT assessment for our transition age youth, the TAE VI-SPDAT, then they're technically prioritized by the coordinated entry process and then referred to permanent housing. So thankfully, we should have enough resources to refer all of our youth immediately to permanent housing. And so the assessment process is more technical than it will be keeping some people from getting housed immediately, but we still have to move through the same process. So then the households referred to permanent housing, they go into permanent housing and then eventually are exited. So if you were in the unsheltered provider or a supportive services only provider, once you've been referred to shelter or permanent housing, that unsheltered or SSO entry shouldn't overlap too long. That's gonna end because you're sheltered and then you're getting into permanent housing. So there will be some overlap between those projects, but we won't have, an unsheltered entry exit open for months while someone's in RRH, or a SSO entry for YHDP open for weeks and weeks while they're also in crisis TH. The idea is to show the movement between these steps of the process. And then for a sheltered client, the path is pretty similar. You're just not doing that extra piece of the unsheltered provider. So if I access shelter, the access point is either entering me directly into shelter or they're referring me to the appropriate shelter. So for example, a youth accesses the supportive services only YHDP project in your area, and then they're referred immediately to crisis TH. And then they're entered into crisis TH for shelter. Could be an example of what that looks like. They're still assessed and they're still referred based on the process for the community. And again, because we have these extra funds, we should be able to immediately refer people to permanent housing programs without having to rely too heavily on the prioritization, but the assessment process still needs to occur. So then the shelter refers the client to the sheltering project refers the client to the appropriate permanent housing project. Once they start in permanent housing, there may be some overlap until they are housed. And then once they are housed, they would be exited from shelter and then eventually exited from permanent housing once that service was ended. And so what this looks like for shelters that don't enter into HMIS is, we're having various levels of success with this prioritization and referral process. But basically, once you become aware of the client, you're trying to get them referred to the appropriate intervention, and you're going to need to document that referral yourself. So for example, if someone's coming from GoodWorks and they're getting referred to RRH, then you're going to have to document that GoodWorks referral yourself. And how that can work is you just let me know and I add that non-participating provider into your enter data as your EDA option. And then you're able to EDA to that non-participating provider, refer to yourself, go back to your own project, EDA, and then close that referral. And that way it doesn't look like clients are coming into RRH without being assessed and referred. For the SSO and crisis TH projects, we don't have to worry about that as much because youth are able to just come right into those projects. And so, the SSO kind of, to a certain extent, would let us bypass that process. But for RRH, it's important to make sure that you document that referral internally, and I can help you do that. So what I want to do now is go into the training site and do some demo. So again, let me know if I'm moving too fast or too slow. This training site is a copy of our live site without any client data. So now I will tell you that some updates it's not always exact, right? Because we have to manually request an update to the training site. So there's going to be a few things on here that are not current. But for the most part, it's going to give you a good sense of what's happening in the site and allow you to see what it looks like. So when you go to the service point URL, it's this exact same URL, except there's no underscore demo. And once I have, well, Heather already has a login. Once I've created Sam's login, the login page will look just like this, except it's not this color. It doesn't say training site. And so when you log in, take a minute. So this is the home screen. And again, yours is going to look a little different because you're not an administrator, but it's still okay for, I'll still show you what it looks like. And then I'm going to shadow an end user so that things will look more how they look for you when you're in the system. Ooh, it's loading slow today. Maybe it's the weather. All right. So on this homepage, you'll see your name and your role up here. And then you'll see your default provider right here. So this is really important because whenever you're entering data into the system, you have to make sure that you're entering it under the correct project type. So your default, you'll have to adjust, and I'll show you what that looks like. We also have the system news right here. Once you're in our system, you're added to our listserv. So if you're ever not receiving emails from us, please just let me know and make sure that I didn't forget to add you. But we do also try to copy all the system news, all the emails from the listserv into the system news feature. So you have another option for checking out information. This follow-up list is an optional case management feature. When you're creating services and referrals and goals, you can set follow-up for yourself, and then it'll pop up. You'll also, and I'll show you this when I shadow, but there's also a homepage dashboard option that we usually set up for you to see incoming and outgoing referrals, but it's customizable. You can customize it yourself, or you can let us know what you want to see, and we can set that up for you so that it can show you current clients, your caseload, some different options there. Up here is the search, the help, and then also the favorites button. So when we're on a client record, you can star it, and then that client will show up in your favorites, which can be useful if you have a particular caseload you're working with or particular client that you're trying to keep an eye on. When you've been navigating between clients, you can use this last viewed feature to quickly return to a client that you were working with. This is the home. Client Point is the module where we spend most of our time entering clients and client level data. Resource Point is just a searchable database of everything that all the providers that are in the system. So if you search it, it'll show you which projects. And if you see this little blue directional icon, that means that project uses HMIS. And then it's got, so I don't know, some people use this, but yeah, it's just a search feature. We don't use Shelter Point for your projects or Scan Point right now. Then you have a reports menu, which yours will be a little abbreviated from mine, but we'll talk about what those look like. And then an admin menu that you won't have a lot of choices with, and then the log out. And again, just a reminder, if you are popping up from your desk to use the restroom or grab a cup of coffee, you just want to make sure that your screen's locked. And then if you're walking away from your desk for any length of time, you have a meeting or you're stepping out for lunch, and you want to make sure that you log out of HMIS. So you won't have this shadow feature, but I'm just going to shadow, actually, I'm going to shadow. I'm actually going to shadow Heather. That's okay. So this is what it looks like to be Heather when she logs into the system. So she has outstanding incoming and outgoing referrals in her dash. And then she has, you won't have backdate. We took that away from you all because you don't need it. But then she has this EDA feature, which she can click and then shows all the different projects that she's able to choose from. Okay, John has access to it. I'll just shadow John. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So the first thing you do when you're entering a client is you go here to client point and then you do a search. So I advise you, even though you have all this other information, to just search by name first, because this search feature is very touchy. So if somebody hasn't used the right like upper and lower case or something like that, it won't show up. And then if you get a ton of results, you can always narrow the search. So this is a training site, so we're not likely to have anyone in here. So then before I create a client, I like to go in and enter all this information, because it just saves you clicks later on. So we have some data quality fields, so this for name, it's full, partial, client doesn't know, client refused, or data not collected. And then social, same options for social security number, and then whether or not the client is a veteran. And then I'm going to click add new client with this information. And then it's going to ask me if I want to add only a client or if I want to add a client and a household. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to add a household, since that's slightly more complicated. When I click that feature, it dumps me out in this add new household screen. So I want to select the correct household type. So we have some options here. And then I'm searching for the other household member. And I see that they're not here. So I'm going to go back up to the top and do just like I did before. I'm going to add all this information. And then add new client with this information. It's giving me a prompt. Did you search? Yes, I did. So that's okay. And then now I see my original client and then the client I added. Once you've added all the clients that need to be in the family, then you click continue. And then this puts us on the household information screen. So I have to mark someone as head of household, and then that'll default the relationship to self. And then I'm marking the relationship for the other household members. This joined household date will default to today's date. If you are not doing live data entry and you are back entering, you are going to want to back this date up so you don't have any issues. Our data quality standard is 5 days. So you want to make sure that you're doing your best to get your data answered within 5 days. And these features, this check mark will set the date to the current date, and then this will just bring up a calendar that you can use to choose a date. So, all right, now we have our head of household, our right joined household date, our relationships. And we scroll down and you can see our 2 household members, and then it's showing their client information. So this is where if you forgot or you needed to add some information, you could edit this information. You could edit that information from here. And anytime you see household members listed on the side here, you can navigate between the 2 records by clicking. Once I make sure all this is correct, then I'm going to click save and exit. Yes. Great question. So yeah, the joined household date is when you're creating that record in HMIS. So those people could have been in a household together for months, but it's the day of the intake. I know, Sam, sorry, I thought I would answer it when I answered, but basically Heather just asked if the joined household date equals the date of the referral, not the date they actually joined the household. So that's correct. It's the date of the intake. So when I exit here, the way the client record is set up is basically like hanging files. So I have my two big green hanging files here of client information and service transactions. And then I have my manila folders underneath of these various tabs. So this put me out on the households tab. And I want to go back over here to the summary tab because this is where we designed. Oh, see? So if you forget to EDA, it will remind you. Oh, why do I keep putting an A in there? Anybody know? Okay. And then that'll put me back out on my home screen, but that's when I can use this last viewed. And then it'll take me back. All right. So now you can see so if I go up here, I can see that I'm EDA'd to the correct project. And then this is what my summary screen will look like. So it has some of my demographic info. It has my household I created. And then it has these various dashlets that correspond to the tabs up at the top. So the next thing I'm going to do after I create the household is add my release of information. I want to make sure to add that on the whole household. And then if I'm entering data into HMIS, the release granted is yes. If it's shared, if I mark this as no, that means that the client doesn't want their data shared and the record needs to be locked, which I can walk you through. It's really easy. If a client decides to be entered anonymously, then there won't be an ROI and you'll be doing the anonymous workflow. And again, if we had to back this date up for the joined household date, we want to do the same thing here. Releases of information should never be longer than 1 year. They can be shorter, but not longer than 1 year. Documentation, most often for RRH, it should be signed statement from client. For SSO, there might be a verbal consent, but then you always want to if you get a verbal consent for outreach, then you want to immediately get a signed consent when you see the client. This witness feature is optional, but sometimes people like to put their initials in there. It's totally up to you. And then I'm going to save the release of information. My next step is to come down here and create the entry exit. Yes, I can unmute you, Heather. Give me 1 second. What's up, Heather?
Okay, so I have a question about what you were just doing.
Yes.
Can you scroll back down so I can see that on your screen? Thank you. Oh, whoops.
Is it here?
So when you're doing the ROI, the reason I'm concerned about that is because if we are entering, let's say, for Serenity House, or we're making the referral for into the Timothy House or something like that, and so you said only the service could do the verbal. I'm concerned about that because there are so many non-participating providers that we may be entering for at that point, and we may not have. Do you see what I'm saying?
So are you going to be entering data for all their clients, or you mean tracking referrals when they're coming to you for services?
So yeah, so as they come to us, which most of their clients will come to us for, let's say, rapid rehousing.
Yeah.
As we're going through the process and we're having to go backwards and do the referral to them and then the referral to us, we may not have had that when they entered that shelter. Or do you see what I mean?
Yes, and that's okay because you have the information as of when you did your intake, and you're just tracking the information about where you got the referral. So I think you're okay to do that because you're really covering the data you're entering from RRH, which includes where that referral comes from. You're not going back in the past and entering data for that other project.
Okay, so this brings another question to mind, and we've really struggled with this workflow because of this.
Okay.
So it was my understanding that they needed to be referred before we did an intake, and then the VI SPDAT would be done to determine that an intake was necessary. So what you're saying is go ahead and do the intake and then backdate everything else, correct?
Well, you should have that information in hand, but if it's coming to you on paper and not from HMIS because they don't participate, then you're documenting it all after the fact.
So they're not doing the VI SPDAT because they're not trained and not doing that. We're doing that for them.
So you would go and do, yeah, so you would be able to document that. So you would be documenting the referral to yourself and doing the project start and then documenting the VI SPDAT information.
All at the same time, basically?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, anything else?
Nope.
All right, cool. I'm going to mute you again, but I can unmute you anytime. Okay, so the next step is our entry exit. We're going to add entry exit. Again, we're going to select the whole household. Make sure we're on the right provider. Select the correct entry type, which is always going to be HUD. And then again, if we need to back this date up, we're going to do that. You don't have to worry about the time. Every once in a while, something weird happens because of the timestamp, but then you just put in a ticket or you call me and I help you. So don't worry about messing with the time. This blue arrow is a refresh button that'll clear the date, just so you know. I don't think we've seen that yet. Then we're going to click Save and Continue. So this puts us on the entry exit data screen. Spinny. So we have our provider up here. If for some reason you were accidentally in the wrong provider, you can change it up here and then click Update. And then we have a little box that shows us the household members associated with the entry exit. Sorry, I'm sure it looks weird moving stuff, but I have a control panel that I'm trying to keep an eye on. So it has our household members and their start dates. It also has a button to create interims and follow-ups. We'll talk about those a little bit. And then you have your assessment options here. So entry, exit, follow-up, update. So we're starting with the entry. And Heather, just let me know if you need it, but I can always add the TAE VI SPDAT here, and then you'll be able to document that on this end. Just make sure to send me an email or put in a ticket so that I don't forget. This household data sharing field, people don't use this a whole lot, but some people like it, so we've left it on there. If you click Add Household Data, it just allows you to add some things that may be similar for both members of the family. And it can be helpful if you have a big family, like Heather was talking about, like a 4-person family. So when I do this, it'll add whatever I put in for all the household members. And so I don't have to do it independently. So you'll see it here. And then again, I can use this to navigate. No, I'm not going to do that right now. And you can see that it's also been answered on this one. I'm going to go back to the head of household. And let me know if there's something in particular that you need me to demo. I'm not going to answer every single question. I'm just going to kind of go through and do some of it and talk about it. But this is where you would enter a date of birth. Actually, maybe I will enter it. Gosh. So date of birth type, again, this is data quality question. Primary race, if there's no secondary race, just leave that blank. Ethnicity, gender is the client's identified gender. Relationship to head of household, for the head of household is always self. And then for the head of household, we are also required to put in a client location code, which is always going to be OH507. It's just the continuum of care code. And then county in which client is being served. Disability information. Does the client have a disability? Yes, no, doesn't know, refused, or data not collected. And then when you're first adding, so for disabilities, income, non-cash, and health insurance, we have what are called sub-assessment records. So there's some questions at the top, and then there's a place to put specific sub-assessment records. And the first time you're entering them, it's easiest to use this HUD verification button. Because I can select no. If I needed to mark yes, I could do this. Anytime you're marking yes for a disabling condition, this if yes expected to be of long continued and indefinite duration and substantially impair ability to live independently should always be yes. So we used to document any disability a client reported, whether or not it affected their ability to live independently, but HUD has said they don't want that. They really only want to know disabilities that affect a client's eligibility for PSH, basically. So if it's not something that makes them eligible for PSH, then you don't answer it. Correct. Heather asked if this is based on a client's answer, and that's correct. At this stage, though, you only have to verify disability if it's an eligibility requirement. So if you're referring a client to Sojourner's PSH project, then it would be Sojourner's responsibility to verify that disability before accepting the client into their project. But at this stage, we're just doing client report. And then these start and end dates, they're the start and end dates of the record, not of the condition. So it's going to default to the entry date, and you want to leave that alone, and you don't want to put an end date on it unless something has changed. In this note box, you can put did I spell that wrong? No, it's just not in there. You can put a note in here if you want, but you don't have to. And then save and exit. And since I put a yes in, this needs to also be yes. So in all of these sections that have these tables, you have to make sure that the answers go together. And then you can navigate these a couple of different ways. You can use these previous and next buttons, or you can click on the magnifying glass, which is what I like to do, which puts the records into a table, and then you can sort based on these headers. So if you need to make a change. Well, that's weird. I'm not going to delete one of those yet. Normally I would delete one of those, but I'm not sure why it duplicated, so I'm going to leave it for now. Oh, it definitely duplicated. Okay, I'm going to trash one of these. That's probably going to disappear both of them. Nope, nope. Okay, so that can be helpful when you're making changes, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So residence prior to project entry. For RRH, this always needs to be a literally homeless designation. So it either needs to be a homeless situation or an institutional situation that is less than 90 days and the person was literally homeless the night before they went into that situation. This county of residence prior is where this residence prior was. So if they were in a different county last night, you would put that in. Otherwise, it may be the same as the county in where they're being served, in which they're being served. So length of stay in previous place, how long have they been in shelter, approximate date homelessness started. So these need to match. So if I'm entering data for January 26th and I said they had been homeless for a week or more or less than a month, then my answer needs to fit. And good question. This is so great. Sojo's Crisis TH is technically operating like a shelter. Heather asked if Sojo's Crisis TH is like shelter, and I've been referring to it as that because it is kind of like that. But for this option, you would still do transitional housing. So I know that's going to look like they're possibly ineligible, but I think for what we're doing, I wouldn't worry about it. We'll deal with that on the data side. Okay. Yeah. I would go ahead and they're still eligible. So it's going to look a little weird, and that's okay. I think we'll deal with that on the reporting end. If I hear something different from Erica, I'll let you know right away, but it is classified as a TH in the system. So I think we need to be consistent and just understand that this is, the particular project that we're doing. Okay. And then regardless of where the client stayed last night, number of times they've been homeless. So it's going to be at least one, but maybe it's more. And then the total number of months homeless on the street in ES or SH in the past 3 years. So the way HUD is looking at this is like if you picture a calendar, any month that has at least one night of homelessness in it counts as a month. So you're not so like today is February 1st. If this client had been homeless since January 12th, then they've been homeless for 2 months because they were homeless a night in January and they were homeless a night in February. So you're not calculating the dates for months. You're counting the months that had a night of homelessness. So if the client's been homeless 3 times, most likely, of course, it could be multiple times in 1 month, but most likely this is at least going to be 3. And it could be more. And then we get into our income questions. So income from any source, yes, no, doesn't know, refused, or not collected. If you put in no, then you need to put in 0. Again, to add these, do the HUD verification. And you can put no, save and exit. All right, I see that you have a question, Sam. I will unmute you. Give me 1 second. What's up, Sam?
Hey, sorry, if we go back to the length of stay in homelessness, and I may have missed it, if they are entering and they're during their like 7 days or something, one night they stay with somebody, and then the other 3 nights they're unsheltered, and then the other 3 nights they're unsheltered, what's the minimum amount of time or the maximum amount of time that they can, during this stay, they can be like on somebody's couch and it still be considered.
So this is looking at last night. So as long as they were homeless last night, they're eligible.
Okay.
So if they were sleeping at a friend's house last night, they are not eligible for RRH.
Okay.
But if they slept out last night and maybe they had been on the couch and then they had slept out or whatever, they're eligible.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And Heather asked a follow-up of how many nights does it, I'm gonna go ahead. Can I go ahead and mute you again, Sam?
Yes.
Okay. Heather asked how many nights, and it's a little bit different when you're talking about long-term like PSH eligibility, but for this, like if it's a night, it's separate. So if they were housed for a night and then they're homeless again, it's a separate instance of homelessness. I know that makes it a lot for these kids that we're working with, but I think that's important to note, that they're having these multiple issues. So down here for non-cash, again, you're going to put yes or no, and then do your HUD verification. And then save and exit. And then health insurance, same thing, your yes or no. And then your HUD verification. Okay. Then we get into the questions that are specific to YHDP that are pulled from the Runaway Homeless Youth assessment. So the clients identified sexual orientation, last grade completed, whether or not they're in school, whether or not they're working. If yes, what type of work? If no, are they looking? Are they unable, or are they not looking? General health status, dental health status, and mental health status. This is all as it's identified by the client. Then we get into our domestic violence questions. Is the client a survivor of domestic violence? This is a mistake. This says if yes, when occurred on the live site, and then are you currently fleeing? Then down here, we have some things that are specific. So we have your permanent housing move-in date. Most likely at the date of entry, you will not have a housing move-in date for a client. So you're going to leave that blank. And then for SSO, there's a place to put outreach and housing status information. So then we would save that. And then scroll up and go to the other family member and enter all the same information for them. So some things to note for family member, it's really important to put the correct relationship to head of household. Since it's not self, you don't have to put the client location. The other thing I want to note, and I made a couple with no children, and they're both adults, but like if they had had a child, you only answer the blue questions. So when you're adding stuff for a child of a client, so if it's a minor head of household, you're treating it more like an adult. But if it's a child of the head of household, you only have to answer the blue question. So you'd skip all this stuff, catch health insurance, and be done. And then save and exit. So, let's see, I'm thinking about what I want to do next. So let's look at how to add services. So if I'm going to add a service, I'm going to add multiple services, which we just did that because the screen's a little bit easier. Services are only recorded on the head of household. So we're going to leave that alone. I'm going to make sure it's the right provider. Even though this is add multiple services, we're adding them one at a time. So this is going to default to one, and you're going to want to leave that alone. And then again, if you need to back up, then you want to make sure to back up. Services always start and end on the same date because we're recording something that already happened, a discrete service that already happened. So in this case, it's case management. And then we're using this type of RISE service field to help track services. So this one doesn't, I forgot, doesn't. I'm just going to do home-based services for this. It's probably not the best solution, but for case management. And then you can add a funding source if you want, if you need to track your financial assistance, but you don't have to. But that looks like this. And then I think I put some YHDP and I can adjust these. So yeah, I don't think I have anything in here for YHDP right now, but if that's something you want, just call me or put in a ticket and I can add it. And then when we're adding a service, the need is always closed and fully met. Because we're recording something that already happened. And then you can either add another or save and exit. That dumps me out on the service transaction screen, but if I go back to client information, I can see that I now have a service there. For goals, you go in here to case plan. Add goal. And then, again, we're doing this just on the head of household. This case manager field will only populate if you've added yourself or someone else as a case manager under the case managers tab. And then if you need to back up, you want to make sure to do that. Classification. Type. You can put in a description if you want. You can put in a target. And then the status is identified or in progress, most likely, unless you are documenting a goal that was already met. And then portion complete if you're working on it. So this is a place where you can set follow-up. Again, you have to have somebody set as case manager, but you could set a follow-up here for yourself if you wanted. And then I click add goal. Oh, thanks. Heather asked about something like case management that's ongoing. So no, instead of leaving it open, you're going to record a separate instance of case management, like each time you do a home visit or something like that. And if that doesn't answer, let me know. Okay, so when I save the goal, then it leaves me a place to add a case note. I can add action steps. Yeah, I know it is a lot. I would suggest, the ballpark Heather was concerned about recording every instance of case management. I would say for those now to just So under the RI regulations, you only have to record one instance of each particular service. So you really only have to put case management down one time. For HCRP, we advise people to do it like once a month. So it's really up to you how you want to do that. It's more important that you get like those financial services and other specific things added. You don't need to put in a case management record every single day that you talk to somebody. She's glad to hear that. So this is a place where you can put an action step. And again, you can put a target date. And then identified or in progress. So this is just very similar to the goal when I'm putting in an action step. Anytime you see this binder clip, you can do a file attachment, just so you know. So like if I had housing, I mean, you don't have to put this in HMIS, but if I had housing leads or something and I wanted to save those in here, I could add a file attachment. And then you also have the ability to add a service from the goal screen. So you don't have to go back out. So if you we could have done this first and then done that case management service from here if we wanted to. And then I'm going to save and exit. Oh, okay. Heather said that there's a limit on size and that they've had some trouble loading files. That's good to know. Keep me posted on that because we're new to the file attachment feature. So it may be that you have to attach them in smaller clumps, like break up the pages, which I know is a pain, but that might be the best solution because I don't think we have control over that file attachment size. So the next thing I want to show you is doing interims. So say we house this client. We would come in here to the entry exit tab, click this interim button, add an interim review. For and then for interims, you want to make sure that you mark the whole household. So again, services and referrals, head of household, assessment information and releases of information, whole household, TAVI SPDAT assessment, head of household. So if you're ever in doubt, just ask. For RRH, it's almost always going to be an update because you're not going to be serving people for a year. And then you're going to put whatever the date is and then save and continue. So if there's been any changes, this is where we're going to document them. So maybe they got food stamps. So I'm going to click yes. And then I'm going to click the pencil for food stamps. I'm going to end it as of yesterday. And then save and add another. Select food stamps. Oh, sorry. I'm going to leave this open and save it. Sorry, this one should be the day before. So that was my fault. Let me go in and change that. So now I can see I have a continuous oh, I missed that receiving benefit. Needs to be yes. So now I can see I have a continuous record from entry, no to yes, and my yes matches. I'm also going to put in my permanent housing move-in date. We'll say that's today. And then I would save. Permanent housing move-in date needs to be on each household member. So I would want to make sure to go over here and put it in here as well, and then save and exit. So the last piece in the entry exit is the exit itself. So, once I've had my stay, I've done all my services, the client's exiting, hopefully to permanent housing, then I'm going to click this exit pencil, select the destination. Oh, I have to make sure I select the whole household. And then my destination, hopefully rental by client, no ongoing subsidy. And then save and continue. And then this is going to look very similar to the entry or to the update screen, except there are some extra questions specific to YHDP that are that need to be answered. Sorry, this is so slow today. Okay, so I have some exit destinations. So I make any updates here and then to any of this information, and then exit destination, safe is determined by client. Sorry, having some computer issues. But this is basically a yes, no, exit destination. Oh, that worked. Oh. Sorry about that. So exit destination, safe is determined by client, as determined by worker. Client has permanent positive adult connections outside of project. Client has permanent positive peer connections outside of project. Client has permanent positive community connections outside of project. So you're going to answer all those appropriately and then save and exit. And you would actually, sorry, I didn't show you navigating, just like with the update and the entry, you would go between both family members and make sure everything was updated before you did save and exit. So that's like the entry exit process in a nutshell. I'm going to go back to my slideshow. So just a review of what we went through. We did creating a client in a household, entering the release of information, entering a client into the project. I am going to talk about referrals, but we didn't do a referral yet. And then referrals to shelter are picked up by the shelter provider, and referrals to RRH are picked up by RRH. We didn't go over entering the TAVI SPDAT because we were doing an RRH entry, but if you need, it sounds like you're going to need me to add that, and you're going to email me or put in a ticket so I don't forget, and then you'll be able to do that VI SPDAT from that same assessment menu in the entry exit, just like you do the entry exit update. And then referrals to permanent housing for sheltered projects. PH provider picks up referrals, so we'll go over that. And then the client would be exited from their shelter provider or unsheltered if that was in the system, and then they would be exited from permanent housing when they were done. We went over the specific YHDP assessment questions from the RI assessment. So those were sexual orientation, last grade completed, school status, employed, the health status questions, and safe and appropriate exit. Housing move-in date was added for RRH, and then outreach and housing status was added for SSO. We went over the goals and case plans feature. We went over how to do file attachments and discussed that they can't be very big, so you might have to do a bunch. Heather gave us some valuable information there. And then YHDP projects will document interactions with clients using the service transactions feature. We talked about those. Okay, before we move on to reporting, I want to demonstrate referrals. And to do that, I am going to do a different EDA. So for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to say this client was referred from unsheltered. So I'm EDA'd as the unsheltered provider. Go to last viewed. Now, of course, the client would have an entry exit for this and all that, but we're just doing referrals. So got my outgoing referrals thing. I'm going to click my add referral button. I'm going to select, now again, only on head of household. I'm going to select rapid rehousing programs and click add terms. It looks like nothing happened, but if you scrolled all the way down, you can see it made a need for rapid rehousing programs. So anytime we add a service or a referral, it creates a need that that service or referral is meeting in the system. And both of those components have to be managed. So I can use this referral provider quick list, or I can go down here and go through the search. Oh, it's right here. Sorry. So I'm going to do YHDP RRH. So now I've got my provider selected. If I need to back this up, I'm doing that. Referral ranking, single or household. If I had a TAVI spit out already, I could add it here. I can set a follow-up date for myself if I want. And again, you need to add yourself as a case manager, which you would have already done in the unsheltered workflow. You can click here to notify providers by email. If you're referring to yourself, that's probably not as important. If you're referring to another agency, you always want to do a warm handoff and follow up with a phone call or an email to let them know that you've made a referral. So I can see I've got the project, the client, I've got the need. Now I backed this referral date up, so I have to back the need date up as well because the referral can't be before the need. The system will give you an error. And then I'm leaving it as identified right now. Now, of course, we know it's been met because we did this backwards, but if I was just making this referral, it would be left as identified. And there is a place to add notes if that's something you're interested in that's not required. And then I'm going to click Save All. So now I have, it dumps me out on the Referrals tab. And if I go back to my client information, my summary screen, I can see that I have an outstanding outgoing referral. And so if I needed to pick that referral up, then I'm going to go up here. I'm going to EDA to YHDP RRH. And that's not showing on my dash because we don't have that set up on John's dash, and I'm shadowing him. I'm going to select the client. And now when I go, if I scroll down, I see I have an outstanding incoming referral from the unsheltered provider. So I'm going to click this pencil. says no household members associated because it's defaulted to the head of household. That's correct. We don't want to mess with that. And then I'm coming down here to do the outcome, which in this case was accepted. If I had set a follow-up, I'd want to mark that here. It's going to show up on your home screen forever. And then because the referral was accepted, the need is always going to be closed and fully met. And then I am going to save and exit. And you can see accepted, closed, fully met. And when I go back to the summary screen, there's no outstanding referrals. So that's what that looks like in terms of picking up and making a referral and picking it up. So Heather asked where you put the amount of financial assistance. So if you add a service, I'm just slow me down if I'm going too fast. For rent payment rent deposit assistance, you would add that here. So you'd click add funding source, and then, so I think what I'll need to do is make a new funding source for you. So that's another thing to like email me about. Right now I'm just going to pick this internal budget. But yeah, email me or put in a ticket. I can make a YHDP funding source for you. And then you put in the amount. Closed, fully met. So that's what that looks like. You do that in services and then save and exit. And if you want me to create like a specific YHDP funding source for you, like I said, just email me or put in a ticket and then I can add that for you. And then that shows here on our services. Okay. To my slides. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about is reporting, which first and foremost, all users should follow the data quality standards. They outline the basic reporting guidelines for HMIS data quality. I anticipate that they're going to be releasing a YHDP specific annual performance report or APR. In the meantime, you should run the COC APR 2018, and I can show you how to do that. Oop. Sorry. So when you're doing reporting, can go to reports, COC APR. Make sure you're on the project you want. Now the APR only works right on a 1 year period. So even though we know we don't have data from this far back, we want to put in a 1 year period. Put in the correct entry exit type, and then build report. This one sometimes takes a minute, but it shouldn't take too long, so we're in the training site and we don't have any data. It's not a lot of data in here. So then if you scroll down, you can see clients who've been entered. And anytime you see blue, you can click on it and it'll give you the client IDs for the clients that are listed there. And so It's just all kinds of information. There won't be any information on the YHDP specific stuff yet, but like I said, I anticipate that being released. Some other reports you might be interested in, and they all work pretty much the same way. The client served report will show you all the financial transactions that you've recorded. The entry exit report shows you everyone that's been in and out of your project. The referrals report can show you, all referrals, just outstanding, just ones that have been completed. And then your service transaction report will show you all your service transactions. So those are all pretty useful. There we go. So, other questions? What screen do we print the homeless verification from? Oh, well, what we'll do, since Sam wants to talk too, is I'll just unmute you and we can just talk. And then, like I said, when I put the recording up, I'll just cut that part out. So, homeless verification, I think we don't have anything specific for that. So from HMIS, I think you would just Control P and print the summary page that showed their entry exit history would probably be the best thing to do, because we don't have something specific that's homeless verification. Other YHDP, I know we're going to move into another part, but other YHDP specific questions before I unmute that we want to cover here. Okay. Well, as a reminder, support requests go to hmis@cohio.org. Most of the time they're going to be picked up by me, but that way if I'm out or something, someone else will see it. And then just to go over our team, I'm the support coordinator. Janelle is our data analyst who writes all our custom reporting. Matt is our main technical assistance and training coordinator. So if you do advanced training, like intermediate training or reporting training, he will be the one that conducts those most often, and he does a lot of one-on-one support. And then our newest team member is Carolyn, who's part HMIS, part COC, although we claim her as ours, but she's very specifically working on training materials, an e-learning platform, forms. She's the one who revised all the forms for us, so doing a lot of those types of things to really improve and bolster our materials. Okay, well, thank you very much.